our people are suffering, and production, especially in our rural areas, is going to go to zero if we add tax on fuel. I therefore would want to say it very clearly here that if we want to revamp the economy of this country, adding tax on fuel is not the solution. The solution is empowering our farmers, our producers, who normally produce crops that bring dollars into this country.
And Honorable Speaker, we should not be worried when others prophesy the beginning of the end of a regime, because we have seen many other prophecies before, including those from Shakahola. Honorable Speaker was saying it is indeed true that a rise in VAT by 8% will occasion a rise in fuel prices, Honorable Speaker. But it must not be lost on us that without the G2G intervention on fuel prices, today, with the dollar trading at 140 shillings plus, the cost of fuel today without the necessary interventions done by this regime would be at a figure of about 210 plus shillings without the interventions that have been taken by government.
So that was the debate back and forth, particularly on a number of issues. You're the mathematician, Sam. There were, what, 84 or 86 clauses that they were voting on?
I think there were 86.
Yes, 86, correct. And one of them, one of the major ones that would have a huge implication of our lives is on the increase of VAT on fuel products from 8% to 16%. That's essentially doubling the amount of VAT that will be charged on those products. And this actually caused division, didn't it? And then,
yes, it did.
But
it still sailed through.
You know, it still sailed through.
Yeah.
This is major, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And of course, a lot of explanations have come from personalities representing the side of Kenya Kwanza administration, them saying that indeed it is important to have a standard rate of VAT in this country. The chairperson of the Finance and Planning Committee, Kuria Kimani, was telling parliamentarians yesterday or last evening that what happens is that when people are claiming the input VAT, because see, the VAT has to be passed on to the end consumer. So if you buy your product and you charge 8% and you need to claim it back after adding other components which are 16%, so it has been bringing confusion. And he was saying because of that balance of 8%, it has been being financed by the taxpayers. And so it gets to that point that obviously yes, there are logical explanations, but there's real impact, which will begin as soon as the president signs the bill into an act to become an act of parliament, but also depending on EPRA, that is Energy Petroleum Regulatory Authority, when they release the figures, because usually they do it on 14th of every month, so probably 14th of July, or if they want to now take effect with a new bill, then they may do it at the start of the month. But that implication is real, because if you look at the screen there, it's currently the VAT charge is 13 shillings, 48 shillings. So if everything is to be held constant, then you expect that to double to about 26 shillings, 96 cents. But then again, there are certain things that Parliament did yesterday, that is reducing the import declaration fee and also reducing the railway development levy. So, but it's...
But you notice the reductions of those are way more minimal compared to the VAT, so it doesn't cancel out.
It is actually minimal because actually once you calculate, eventually you end up with a net effect of about an increment of 11 shillings for a litre of petrol, and at least 10 shillings for a litre of kerosene and a litre of diesel, should this continue into the new month. But again, obviously this will depend on what will be the landed cost of oil this month, which is the month of June, that will determine the prices in July. Obviously, if the landed cost reduces, then you'll be at a better place, but still an increment because of the VAT. But if it goes up, then you can expect, even if that percentage in RDL or IDF reduces, it is still a smaller percentage of a bigger thing.
But you know, one of the things, because we've got 9 taxes, different taxes that are levied on our petroleum product on the landed cost, and it's always been the case that the taxes sometimes are, if not equivalent to sometimes even higher than the cost of, the landed cost. Now and landed cost, by the way, is just the product itself. So the petrol, the diesel, the kerosene, as it arrives, that cost. And then, of course, we add on our taxes. For me, it was interesting to watch this because I sat with the then deputy president, and he was presidential candidate at the time, and I asked him specifically about this question. It was obviously something that has been in talks for a while. Remember, even getting VAT onto petroleum products was something that came up during the previous administration. And I asked him specifically about it. And he said one of the ways to reduce the cost of fuel in this country is to work on the taxes, because that is where our sphere of control is. The landed cost is subject to international oil markets and international oil prices, over which we have very little control, if any. And so it really is the number of taxes, the amount of those taxes. And he said to me and the nation, millions of people who are watching, that he would seek to reduce some of the taxes. In fact, now we have seen an increase in that. And granted, people can, do, and should change their minds if new sets of information or circumstances are different. But I would really want to hear from him today, his thoughts around it, like what changed from July 26th last year when I sat with him to this point in time when we're saying, okay, we're going to increase something like VAT on fuel.
And Yvonne, I know as a country we have different political affiliations and people are sharply divided over those lines. But I think one thing that most Kenyans will really, really agree on is that the cost of living is biting for everyone. It does not pick which side of the political divide you're in. And a lot of them think that the government is maybe not doing enough to ease the misery that people are experiencing because of the high cost of living. And when debate on the finance bill was ongoing and the public participation sessions that we had, na General Maoni kutoka wananchi, it was this thing should not pass as is. Yes, there were some of those amendments that were introduced by the committee after the budget was passed and the finance bill was being discussed. But this one of the fuel levy going up to 16% was one that was a lot of people rejected, did not want, because they knew the effect of that on the cost of living, on their pockets. And I talked about how the people who are affected by poverty and the cost of living is going up. And I was talking about the statistics from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. Shows that widespread poverty is affecting nearly 40% of our population of nearly 50 million people. At least 5 out of every 13 Kenyans live in abject poverty, with more sinking into this situation. Yeah. The report shows that 2 out of every 5 Kenyans in rural areas and 2 out of 6 in urban settlements are languishing in poverty. Mm-hmm. On the whole, about 30% of all citizens are unable to meet their food needs. That is the situation as it is now. This was a report from last year. What will that mean in the next 1 month or so? Yeah, and remember, the cost of fuel affects literally the cost of everything, transportation. So, food to everything. Bus fare is going to go up. Yeah. The cost of food will go up. Remember the cost of electricity, because we depend on diesel-powered generation of electricity to some degree. But then there's also the cost of that is factored into our electricity bills. And this is a year when the cost or price of electricity has gone up twice already in just the first 6 months alone. So this is going to be, we typically say pain at the pump, but this will be pain everywhere.
And Yvonne, it's beyond the pump, because there is something else the cost of energy does, and that is to discourage production. Yeah. Manufacturing is going to take a big hit from these costly prices of the high cost of energy. And there's something else that I would have wished this budget to observe, and that is, first of all, to appreciate that when it comes to the cost of living, it has been biting for some time now. It's not tied to last year's election. Before last year's election, the cost of living was already a big problem. Right. Because there's something in the last, even as much as 10 years, there are some fundamentals that were not working right, that then have been punishing the consumer. And so I think what one would have expected to see and hear is a budget that can spur growth. How do you stimulate growth? How do you send the factories back roaring again? How do you create employment in the manufacturing sector where really growth is supposed to be generated? How do you make the private sector, which is the driver of growth in this country, to basically function again? So it looks tough. It's going to be tough from the 1st of July going forward because we don't have a budget that grows. We have a budget that tries to raise revenue, a budget that tries to get more money for government. And guess where much of this money will end up? In recurrent expenditure. Yeah. This is going to pay the cost of running government. It's going to, a bit of it will end up in projects, but a lot of it will be the day-to-day managing of the huge bureaucracy that we have as a country. You have, and by the way, we still have pending 50 cabinet, what are they called, chief administrative secretaries, CASs. You know, this is what we are raising the money for, largely for. Yeah. And so quite sad going forward, especially starting the 1st of July when the cost of energy becomes a problem. I think we sat here and spoke about the horticulture sector, where some were closing shop to go to Ethiopia and try and find places where the cost of energy is affordable. So I don't know, we want to tax ourselves to growth. Let's see. We are a country of experiments. Yeah. So this should be our latest.
It is. And before we carry on, I just want us to listen to some more members of National Assembly during that debate and the voting process. I'd like us to start with the county woman member for Kilifi, Gertrude Mbeyu. And then we can listen to Opiyo Wandayi.
Ulisikia wapi? Nyinyi ndio mliosema Kenya haina pesa. Kenya iko broke. Nyinyi mwenda kuongeza mafuta, bei ya mafuta mara 100%. Hawa mama mboga ambao wanaenda sokoni wataenda na mafuta ya gari gani waweze kujikimu? Hawa boda boda mlikuwa mnawazungumzia wataweza kufanya kazi zao vipi? Serikali msituchezee.
Madam Chair, if there is a demonstration of the lack of interest in the welfare of the boda, if there's a demonstration of the lack of interest in the welfare of the mamamboga, it is this decision or attempt by the Kenya Kwanza government to increase VAT on fuel, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I can tell you, if by any chance, and God forbid, that this finance bill is passed and it becomes an act of parliament, that will mark the beginning of the fall of this regime. I can tell you, it will not take more.
Finally, leader of majority.
Now, of course, all of this is difficult for the members of the public, but the government is keen on raising revenue. And from what we've seen from this finance bill, it's raising revenue from any which way possible. Is it fake beards? Is it fake lashes? That was taken out, yeah? You know, among other things. Yeah, please let it be on record that Sam did not say thank heavens.
To spur growth.
Because, to spur growth, maybe of my eyelashes, perhaps. But you can tell, ni zoa hapa, you know, just get from as many sources as possible, and you know, look into where you can make the most money. How much will they be making, you know, out of this extra 8% VAT on fuel? And how important is that figure?
Yeah, let me begin by just illustrating something. Because it may sound as if 11 shillings, 10 shillings is not a lot. But imagine a vehicle, a PSV, that is passenger
service vehicle, yeah.
Is it? No, it's public service vehicle.
Passenger ilikuwa zamani.
I'm
sorry.
So assuming that a PSV fuels 60 liters per day, that is, assuming the full tank is 60 liters and they drain it and it's enough to run all the trips they need to run from whichever point to whichever point. So 60 liters, increase it by 11 shillings. so that you, okay, let's increase by 10 shillings for ease of calculation, so that you get to 600 shillings per day. So let that vehicle ply the route for 30 days. You get to 18,000 shillings. So that's the much...
that's an increase.
The cost of fuel will go up for that matatu. 18,000 is money enough to pay some drivers or to pay conductors.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you think the owner of that vehicle is going to fire the driver?
No.
No, because it has to run. So this cost has to be transferred
somewhere
to the consumer or somewhere. So you can start to imagine what the cost of transport will be. But coming to the question of how much is government looking to collect, the information I have from the Finance and Planning Committee is that from the finance bill as passed yesterday, they're going to collect 311 billion shillings more.
Every
that is every year.
Every year.
Obviously, already they're collecting resources or revenue from the current laws that there are. But with those amendments, then it increases the government revenue by 311 billion shillings in a year. That is in a perfect world, that everything works as it should.
Right.
From the VAT increase on fuel, that is 8%, then they're hoping to collect 51 billion shillings, which is coming out to assist the government in revenue. And then for housing levy of 1.5% without a limit, they're hoping to collect 73 billion shillings. So those are good resources, especially when you're looking at an administration that, or a government that has in the past few months been unable to finance some of the crucial operations, for instance, personnel emoluments and even other activities in the, whether it's in the counties or at the national level. So it would make sense that at least you're collecting resources to meet your needs or your expenses. But at the same time, it is coming with an impact, which, yes, a difficult situation for the government, but also it appears as if they're not necessarily sensitive to the current times with all the explanations given. We just hope and wait and see what happens, especially in the coming months on the implication of this.
And you know, Sam, you've talked about, I want to move to the housing levy. Because you've touched a little bit on that. So what a dramatic shift from what we saw before in the initial proposal, which was 3%, right? And then, you know, your employer would match that figure. That was supposed to go to the National Housing Development Fund. And the idea was that it would be a place from where you can get a home. And I know there was lots of debate as to who would qualify and what would that mean. But then there was lots of sort of places of exit. So initially it was that after 7 years, if you didn't get a house or were not interested, you could, you know, leave the plan, get your money, maybe not that of your employer, you would get it upon death or whatever. You know, all of those things that were said. And then there was public participation, quite robust, I must say. But then the proposal that came out of it was then something else. Okay, it's been reduced. It's been halved. Now it's a tax. Remember, we kept, is it a tax? Is it a levy? Is it a savings? So now it's completely different.
It's a tax.
It is.
Of your gross
Now
pay.
it's a tax.
Of your gross
now,
pay.
it's obviously different in the sense that, you know, when taxes go to government, it goes to, for lack of a better word, one big pot of money, as opposed to how it was before, where it would go to a specific fund or kitty from which, you know, the houses would be built. It would take us through those changes, because I'm not sure, even the capping, I'm not even sure that people got what they wanted. In fact, quite the opposite. Were we even better off with what it was before, the 3%?
Even the government was making more money with the 3%, right?
Let me start with your last question, because the practicality of it, the capping at 5,000 shillings being the contribution of both employer and employee, meant that the maximum you can be deducted as an employee is 2,500 shillings. But now with the lifting of the cap and saying that for fairness, a tax should be a percentage and everyone has to pay that percentage, so that you do not end up with people who have lower salaries paying a higher proportion than those with high salaries. Of course, logically, makes sense. But the impact is different. We did a few calculations on data point this evening, and seeing the implication of what that means. For a salary of 50,000 shillings, the deduction would be 750,000 shillings. For a salary of 200,000 shillings, the deduction would be 3,000 shillings. For a salary of 1 million shillings, the deduction would be
15,000
shillings
Yeah.
to be matched by the employer at 15. So obviously it gives the government more resources, but it hurts the payslip holder the more. The explanation that have been given, say, from the chairperson of the Finance Committee, that is Kuria Kimani, be it by the chairperson of the Budget Committee, Ndindi Nyoro, on Thursday he was telling me that the decision was reached so that the resources will be collected, they will be kept in a National Treasury reserve account where those funds will be kept there, ring-fenced up until the government is ready with the legal framework and structures. Of course, there are still questions because how do you collect money, put it somewhere, waiting for waiting to be guided how to spend it. Let's listen
That's very dangerous.
Yeah, let's listen to Ndindi Nyoro on his explanation specifically on how this will be done at the National Treasury.
Once people start contributing, what we have at the back of our mind is that we are going to reinvest that money. But by the time we go there, we will already have dealt with the law in terms of once we contribute this money, and I want to persuade you and also to clarify to the Kenyan people, yet, yes, as it is now, it is a tax. It is going to the consolidated fund. But the plan that we have is that we are going to isolate, insulate this money, ring-fence this money so that it purely goes to the intention of a housing program, not purely for people to own houses alone, but because we also want to harness the backward integration that is involved in the housing program.
So I hear that, but will there be supplementary budgets to account for it, or it doesn't have to be?
Or it will be. What will happen is this. Once we pack this money, and all these people know, in the Treasury now, even currently, there is something we call budget reserves, which we actually pack money, especially for emergencies or unforeseen situations. There is nothing wrong with packing this money as we make the law, but we may not actually have to pack the money. The reason why it is not purposely in the estimates is because, you know, this month is usually a marathon for government. We are dealing with estimates, that is the expenditure side of the government. At the same time, we are dealing with the revenue side, which also encompasses policies that some of them necessitate change of law.
That's the explanation of the chairperson Budget Appropriations Committee.
Do you want to go through that again? Just
recap.
Break it down.
I have a question. I mean, you know, if the money is ring-fenced, let's assume that money is ring-fenced, and we're saying this particular pot of money is for
the housing.
So I have two questions. So number one, why we would even start to collect money for a structure that has not been established? Can we not just either do the two concurrently, or have the structures in place first that is then able to receive this money and then, you know, do the intended purpose? That's one. My second issue with that is you ring-fence this money. What happens on the day you need to pay civil servant salaries, for instance?
Na pesa imeisha.
And you don't have any other funds. And remember, you're still working on the structure, right, for this housing levy. So if you have obligations, you will defer those obligations because you've ring-fenced this money, which, by the way, we are still creating structures for, and we will work it out. That, for me, is my concern. Listen, it's very simple. Put the structures in place, put the money, and then that happens. Also, once it's a tax and it goes into, it sort of reminds me of what we did with Eurobond, remember? And the explanations were being given by then Cabinet Secretary for Treasury, Henry Rotich, that the money actually went into budgetary support. You know, when you start to say things like that, then it's very hard to trace that money, where it has gone.
Yes.
You can't trace it. It's not on a specific project. And now when this is a tax that is not going to a specific kitty, that is going to be ring-fenced in all of the other funds, for which we are yet to put in place structures.
And I think this was part of the suspicion, Yvonne, that people had even before it became a tax, was that what is going to happen to the money? Because history has shown us that pesa ikiondoka hairudi. We talked about how pensioners are still struggling to get their money, what a long process and tedious it is for them to get their money. And it's because of that suspicion of hii pesa inaenda wapi, itasimamiwa na nani, itatumika vipi. And you talk about there being no structure yet, then why are we collecting the money is part of the reason why I think to some extent the government was unable to sell this idea to the people and make them actually see it's something that they can that would work for them, that they, yes, they'll have a house at the end of the period. Yes, my money will be spent as I hope it will be spent. Yes, hizi pesa hazitapotea. Yes, hii pesa itaenda into corruption. Yes, you know, all those suspicions that people had. That's why when it was turned into a tax, and I think Gituku, I don't know if you've said this, maybe I may have missed it, that instead of raising 108 billion shillings per year as they had expected to with the original plan, they are now going to be able to raise 73 billion shillings, which is way less than what they had hoped to have. But that still means, and I think to the Kenyans who are watching us, that this thing imepita, that expect that utakatwa 1.5% ya mshahara wako ambao utaenda kwa hazina ya nyumba ya bei nafuu. And we watched Parliament, the discussions that went on late into the night yesterday when they were discussing this particular matter, and they voted on it. And I think over 100 and what Gituku voted for it, 170 something is it, who voted for it, and 80 something who voted against it. I know we're going to bring the politics of all this of this into the discussion now, Yvonne. I think we should. The opposition, as Mio has really said, they don't want this. In fact, they had a presser today. We're going to listen to what they had to say. We don't want this. It's takandamiza mwananchi and all those things that we talk about. But why don't we have more Azimio members of parliament in parliament during the voting and the discussions on this matter? Because when you look through Hesabu, every time that voting was done, there were over 170 plus members of parliament from Kenya Kwanza who were there. They were in the triple digits throughout. In fact,
members of two of those clauses, or three, it was 186, 186.
For the 16% levy, it was 184 and against 88.
And the housing?
Yeah.
It was 186, I think, against 72 or 74, if I'm not wrong.
Largely from Kenya Kwanza, they all supported the bill, plus a few others from Azimio. And there were those who were not there. So the question comes, wasn't the party or the coalition able to rally all its members to be in the House to vote? If it had been a difference of 184 to 120, but 184 to 88, wako wapi? Hata kama some of them voted with Kenya Kwanza. And I think we should listen to what Azimio members of Azimio had to say on this, opposing the housing levy.
Mwalimu ambaye yuko Mombasa, nyumba za jengwa Nairobi, atahama vipi Mombasa wakati amejiestablish kule Mombasa aje akae Nairobi? Huu ni wizi wa dhahiri. Waheshimiwa, mimi nataka niwaelezee, tupanue akili zetu.
Even if we passed this, honorable members, the court will take it and say it is not a function for the national government.
I want to urge the committee to drop this for unconstitutionality and purely a flawed way of thinking that you can solve housing in this country by this kind of approach.
Who has died in the village for lack of a house? I can tell you, the majority of the people who have died in the villages have died because of hunger, lack of food.
The reason why we have no food, why we are food insecure in this country today, is because millions of acres of land in Kiambu County, in Nakuru, in Karachuonyo constituency, in Narok, all over the country, where people are farming, we have disintegrated all that land to build slums.
I think the vote, the discussion, and ultimately the government got its way. And this should show you that this may be the trend for the next 5 years, that whatever the government wants to pass through Parliament, the government will pass through Parliament. Because the conversations about the finance bill have been going on for long, and Azimio has not been silent about it. The leadership has spoken about it, and we thought we'd see a more spirited fight in the House, especially in terms of when the voting happens. But it was almost a bit of an anticlimax in terms of that. Where are they? Is this the trend? Probably. Has the government gotten its way? It probably will for the next 5 years. Voting in the House, 184, 88. I mean, hakuna contest hapo. Hata walalamiki aje, hakuna contest. Hii bill imepita. Whatever complaints people had, we're going to have a meeting in Kamukunji on Tuesday. That's what the Azimio coalition has called for. But that really does not change the law, because the president has 14 days to assent this bill into law. And he can even do it as soon as tomorrow, and there's nothing wrong with that.
I would be willing to bet it won't be even more than 7 days.
So ishapita. Tukifuata sheria ishapita.
I mean, so Linus, again, you know, this is where the rubber really hits the road. We can have all these debates and, you know, public participation. We had the big conversation here on Citizen Television last week, was it? But you know, this is where it all matters, the voting, you know, in the House. And, you know, I guess perhaps they say the minority have their say, majority have their way. But, you know, what does this tell us about our state of democracy?
We have to go back. Parliament is a game of numbers.
Yeah.
And it starts with the election. You have to have a game plan. If you want to be the one smiling on a day like this, then you need numbers. The first thing a party needs is numbers. And that is why you see some of this voting, people think it's unreasonable, or MPs are not using their brains. There is a time the party needs you as a number, and rarely does it need you as a brain. You are a number first and foremost as a member of parliament. And by the way, this is the rule, well, unwritten rule, the world over. You can go to Westminster, go to the House of Congress, the houses of Congress in the US. You can see people who are, well, you know, you would think they're very balanced. But when the party says, we are heading this direction, you become a number that has to be delivered in that way. And that is why there is an office called the Office of the Chief Whip. A whip is supposed to marshal the numbers. And on this game, Azimio lost the game to Kenya Kwanza yet again. Because Kenya Kwanza came with a more disciplined performance in Parliament that is so focused that you say whatever you say about a clause. The position of the party is this bill passes this way. And I think that is where we need to start understanding how democracy actually works. It works first as numbers and last as what I like calling brains. Because there were those who are saying, oh, maybe some Kenya Kwanza members will vote with the Azimio, or that some of these proposals are so unreasonable. But look, you look at the bigger picture. What are you saying to government? Are you going to be a member of the ruling party and then vote in a way that then grounds activities for that ruling party? It doesn't work that way, not anywhere, and least of all, not in Kenya. This was a game of numbers. Azimio did not get their game of numbers right from the election, and it's going to be a repeat. We're going to see a series of this. Not just on the finance bill, but also on future bills that will come to the House. Kenya Kwanza has shown that it's a very disciplined outfit when it comes to just marshalling the numbers. Look at how many times was it 184?
Almost throughout.
It means you have 184 members of parliament who have constantly sat down there. They are not moving. And obviously, not 184 spoke. Just a few of them. You have the majority leader, this and that leader speaking. And then now, the numbers come in, 184. Discipline.
And you remember, even at the beginning of the debate over this finance bill, Silvana Sosoro said they had 50 Azimio MPs who had pledged to vote for the bill. And he said this at the outset. And it started, in fact, he named a few people, and it started to become apparent that those numbers were in line. And therefore, it wasn't just about marshalling their own numbers, but they were very sure, and whatever they'd done, that worked out the math, and they knew that we have these 50 Azimio MPs solidly, you know, in our basket. And at the same time, you know, we saw, you know, the Secretary General of ODM saying, you know, we're going to whip our members in line, call them in. Remember when they were voting on, that was on the report that had been presented by the Finance Committee, right? Which was, you know, the public participation report that they had put out, and their report thereafter. And then you saw, you know, the numbers, the voting pattern was rather interesting. And the Azimio side saying, we're calling our House to order, you know, we're asking our MPs to make sure they vote in that respect. Clearly, they don't have as much pull over their own members as Kenya Kwanza has over their own, including at least 50 of those from Azimio. So, you know, game of numbers, they've got their numbers right. Something is happening on the other side in terms of this.
And beyond the numbers, they got their persuasion right. And persuasion comes in many ways. And remember, at the start of this parliament, Azimio had actually an advantage in numbers, just a slight advantage. But a lot of persuasion has gone into it, and you now have more people associating with Kenya Kwanza than Azimio la Umoja, One Kenya Coalition. And I have to say here that it was also very interesting to see that parliamentarians staying there, some of them knowing they are going to win anyway, but staying there to vote. Some knowing that their side is going to lose, but staying there to express themselves and to even vote. But also that's what they're supposed to be doing. Because if you look at, say, 84 members of the Azimio side, or those that voted with the Azimio side, like Gadeno Mushambo is from Kenya Kwanza, then it will tell you that about 80 Azimio MPs were in the House. There are nearly 150. So the balance of 70, where were they? At least a few of them have been barred from attending.
A couple of sessions,
just a few. So the others, you don't want to know where they were at the point of expressing themselves. But also it's important to note here that, again, when you have private conversations, and I have had some with many members of parliament coming to studio and having discussions on the morning show on Daybreak, and they'll tell you off the mic that, yes, we're defending it, but also there are certain extents of this bill, and especially housing levy, that you do not understand, to the extent that some of them say that actually even some of the biggest, the most vocal personalities that have been selling this bill, there are certain aspects of it they do not understand, meaning it's work in progress. Some of them have been tongue-tied to explain exactly how the implementation will be. But of course, now the hard work begins, because the promise is that these resources will be ring-fenced to ensure that there is affordable housing delivered to Kenyans. But also the president said that this housing levy, it's not about houses. It is about jobs. So that's a very interesting statement for me. And I think we have to now look forward to the interpretation of that and the implementation of what it means. But also, one thing to add, if you look around, some of these many taxes that are being imposed, if it's, of course, the consumption taxes, like excise and VAT, it sort of affects almost everyone. But also those that use fuel more, you know who they are. If you're talking about the changing tax bands for pay-as-you-earn, obviously they're targeting the payslip holders and high-income earners in the society. If you're to look at the housing levy, it is targeting the 3.2 million who are in the formal employment.
The iTax register.
Of course, in the public sector, there are about 987,000. In the private sector, there are just over 2 million. So these are the people that the government is targeting to raise resources, because it is easy to collect money from a payslip. It's just check-off system. And you institute a penalty there and say that if you are an employer, you do not remit these resources by the 9th of this following month, then you're going to pay a penalty of 2% per month for the length of time that you stay with that money. So really you can see the focus of the government. It is to collect revenue as much as possible.
From the same people.
From the same people.
The same
Of course, there are certain efforts to go to the turnover tax. The people that make at least 2,000...
Digital content creators, amongst others,
1370 times 2 should be about 2,700. The people that make that much in a day, they'll be paying a turnover tax of 3%. So there's an attempt to widen the tax net. But how much that succeeds, of course, they know the tax administration measures are difficult, especially for the informal sector.
Enforcement of that and collection is obviously a challenge. So there was also just one other thing before I move to, what happens next and the next steps, was that, the president did now say that, in fact, one of the main, if not the main idea of the housing levy was not, in fact, houses, but was jobs. But then while he was in Kakamega, was it over the weekend, he then said that if a group of young people get a job on building this housing complex, they don't get to do it again, because the idea is to give other people a chance to build the next apartment and that sort of thing. So this is work and jobs that you're getting one-off. So it's also the quality of the jobs, the longevity of the same, the sustainability of it, because if you work on one housing project and you will then be excluded from the next housing project and the one that comes after that, fair enough to give others a chance as well. But you see, how long does it take to put up a building? Maybe 10 months or a year, and you've gotten that job and that's it. So, the quality of the jobs, the longevity of it, the sustainability of the jobs as well, then it becomes kama kibarua, as we know it. You work on this project, and when it is done, you know,
And
on to
add
the next.
That, there are different skills.
Yeah, that's
in
right.
Building. There are those that are good at digging the foundation.
Masons,
There are
exactly.
those that are good at
the plumbers.
Yes.
Shall we say weaving? I don't know what the correct word it is.
Yeah.
Until unatengeneza chuma for reinforcement.
Yes.
That's what I'm talking about.
For the slab, yeah.
There are those that are experts in paint work.
And you're right, the ones who do the slab, kazi yao inaisha. Then there's others who now put up the walls. And then there's others who do the electricals and the plumbing and, you know, painting, plastering.
There are jobless doctors, nurses, bankers, journalists. What will they do?
And then when you talk about the employer and how much that they need to match.
Yeah.
So we talked about how if you earn 50,000 shillings, you'll pay 750 and your employer 750. We talk about, I think, 3,000 shillings for someone who earns 100,000 shillings. That's for you and the employer. I think those who earn 800,000 shillings is 12,500 for yourself and your employer. Those who earn $1 million is 15,000 for yourself and 50,000 from your employer. Cumulatively, an employer who has maybe 400 workers who are in a particular range, where do you expect them to get the money that they're going to have to top up their housing fund?
Yeah, something's got to give. Even something's got to give on the part of government, because I do remember CS Treasury, during the budget reading last week, did talk about layoffs within the civil service. So
we already have, I think, 200 workers from
KEMSA. Yeah. And from what we know, a few more tomorrow, perhaps, and in the coming days. So there's 200 people from KEMSA who by July 1st will no longer have jobs. Perhaps KEMSA is a different story altogether, but the CS Treasury did say that we should expect layoffs within the civil service. And that's been a long-standing conversation about it being bloated and the effect that it has on the wage bill. So you can imagine even that income from those who will be retrenched or laid off will be lost. And that's housing levy that, will be lost. And that's NHIF, NSSF, and all of other statutory deductions, including even consumption taxes like VAT. You don't have a job, you don't have money, your disposable income goes down, you're spending on food, bus fare, and all of these other items that attract VAT goes down. I mean, it's going to be a very interesting...
The 3.2 million people that we're targeting to tax from, you're going to reduce.
It's going to reduce. That's right. That's right. Employers are going to have to make some really hard choices. Lena, Stephen, as you come in, but before you do, I want us to listen to this last soundbite from the Azimio meeting that took place today, where they talked about the voice of the people being ignored. I think we'll get it at some point. But then now calling for something... Is it back to the streets on Tuesday? Does that get us anywhere? Linus.
I think it'll be interesting to see and hear what kind of conversation we'll have 1 year from now about this housing levy, housing tax, correctly, if we can put it that way, correctly now. It's no longer a levy, it's a tax, that's official. This time next year, what will Kenyans be saying? By this time next year, Kenyans will start counting. So if we said the construction of affordable housing will create jobs, then the math begins at Sam Gituku's desk now. And by this time next year, we'll be counting that these are the jobs that we have created. What I'm skeptical about is the level of confidence in government about how this is. It's coming almost like a prescription. And a prescription, my clansmen sometimes sell this herbal drink in town, and they tell you,
inatibu kila kitu.
Inatibu kila kitu. And a lot of people have taken that. I know it treats quite a bit of stuff, but not everything. It certainly doesn't clear debts if that's one of the reasons you take it. But there is this very certain voice that comes from government that this is the direction. If we go this way, we'll create employment. I think government should also look at the last 60 years and how we got here in the first place. Where is the place of private enterprise? We are a nation that has been built through hard work of more private sector than government.
Yeah.
We are a product of more private sector-driven growth than government initiatives. So I think further down the line, maybe by this time next year, we'll also be reviewing what government should actually be doing, which is create an enabling environment for private sector to create those jobs. That is where creativity is thriving. That is where innovation is thriving. Every new thing that has been tried in this country has come through the private sector.
Yeah.
Whether you're talking of digital transformation, it's coming from private sector players.
Yeah.
But there's something about this housing, affordable housing conversation. What it has done also is to almost criminalize things, including almost giving employers a bad name. Salaries and pay slips. You know, you'd hear. And sometimes I can see, you know, the gap and level of understanding of a contemporary pay slip, what a contemporary pay slip actually does. And this is a problem of people who are in political office. Sometimes in their path, they have not really encountered what a regular pay slip does. A regular pay slip has built this country. How many people do employed people feed, clothe, take to school?
Yeah.
From teachers to...
Not just in their immediate family.
Not just in the immediate family.
Yeah.
That pay slip, I think government should walk into that pay slip with a bit of respect. Just respect how far it has got in this country. It has educated, including a lot of people who are in government now. They have been educated through pay slips of people who have struggled to actually do that. So this attitude of coming and almost declaring as if, oh, that pay slip that has been working untaxed, you know.
You remember what the president said, that you know, we're deducting this 3% and you will be left with 97%
of your salary.
Then, you know, you then have to ask the question, are you aware that there is other statutory deductions, but that, you know, like you say, that pay slip educates not just, I mean, a man or a woman won't just educate their children. They will educate their siblings, their relatives, their cousins. They will look after their aging parents. They will, you know, pay for their ailing health. And this is because funds like NHIF are not as effective as they should be for their parents. You know this. The minute you have a salary, it is not yours. It is really a community salary. So whilst those with pay slips are lucky, because, you know, in an economy like ours, you are lucky and privileged and blessed to have a job and have a pay slip, but that pay slip does not belong to you alone. And those are some of the things to understand. So in some ways, si ati watu wako na salary wanakula raha, you know, ni sherehes and parties every day. There's so much commitment that goes, and it actually goes towards building the community, educating those children that, by the way, the government should be educating. It goes to looking after the elderly that the government should be doing. In fact, just today, they've announced that they will be releasing a backlog of the monies that they give to the elderly.
Yeah.
So who has been taking care of those elderly people since November? Yeah. Now that the government has not been giving them that money? Guess what? It is people who work. It is people who run small businesses who are now being asked, you know, for the turn of a tax. That's where it is, and it's to understand, you know, what that means and how far that stretches. And in fact, that one payslip does the work that the government should be doing for tens and hundreds of others. And until the day that is, you know, acknowledged and at least recognized for what it is, as opposed to being demonized, that you, the people who have pay slips, you don't want the others to not own houses, you know, that's a rather interesting...
And it is really simple. It's just interacting correctly with the journey of this country and how you really have to understand how people got where they are. It's that pay slip. Respect it.
Yeah.
Now, there is something else, and I pity employers. They have also not been treated well in this conversation. They are painted almost as if they are tax evaders, if I can put it that way. And there's this us versus them thing that also attended to this conversation around affordable housing. Oh, the employer will get for you more from your employer. Do we, for example, understand how the employment space works in terms of filling the gaps where government fails?
Yeah.
Take health, for example. Walk around this country, hundreds of employers take the extra step of preparing medical cover for their employees, because you do not have, you can't rely on NHIF, the national, the National Hospital Insurance Fund, which is driven by government. So I think there's been a lot of toxicity around this housing levy, affordable housing, and there's some healing to be done, even whichever way things go from July, whether the raid on the pay slips is going to go ahead, or somehow forces of nature would stop that.
Okay. That's a good place to leave our conversation tonight. Some interesting perspectives. Allow me, if you will, to just read one tweet from, you call yourself Ilias Njogu, says, about the housing tax, the fundamental thing is once money gets to the consolidated account, the first priority is paying debts. Actually, first pay is debt and pension. Yeah. But it goes on to say, so whether ring fencing or not, housing will automatically be an afterthought. And then Dave NK says, for someone to argue that businesses will claim input VAT misses the point. The end consumer, that is the ordinary Kenyan, will pay the full 16%, meaning that consumer prices will go up, yet they're already too high. This will lead to lower consumption, which will not grow the economy. And then someone said, there's nothing wrong with living in Rongai. That's Sama Kwale, a former judge of appeal, an anti-corruption chief, and a former head of public service, all live in Rongai. Then finally, Tony Mudhomi says, people are buying millions worth of shares in the counties and the national government. They are doctoring petroleum and edible oil tenders, yet service delivery is at 0%. I've been waiting for a good conduct certificate for 2 months. Wow. Interesting. Thank you for your thoughts. Thank you for your views and for watching our show tonight. And every night, the hashtag is NewsGang. Keep the conversation going. There's so much more feedback there. You can interact with it there. Thank you for watching our show. We will see you again next week. God willing. Good night. Good night. God bless.
Good night.